Let's go now to the Sydney CBD and catch up with the Deputy Leader of the Liberal Party, Sussan Ley. Thanks for joining us, Sussan.
It's a pleasure, Chris. Good to be on your program.
First up, your thoughts about Adam Bandt and the flag.
Oh, it's disgraceful. I mean, Australians fought and died under that flag. It's a unifying symbol for us as citizens of this great country all over the world. I love and respect the Indigenous flag and have been part of making sure that it flies proudly in my electorate in Western New South Wales and wherever we agree with as we co-design policies and notions with Indigenous people, wherever they would like to see it. But that's quite separate from the Australian flag. And I don't know. But remember, it's these Greens that Anthony Albanese will need to negotiate the passage of his legislation through the Senate. And I think that that is a perfect example of why we really should not trust them.
Yeah, it is a worry. They're going to have huge influence when Parliament sits, when it eventually sits. Are you concerned that Parliament won't sit till late next month?
It does seem a very light sitting schedule. Maybe the Labor Party doesn't want to expose its ministers to question time and being held to account. But ultimately, the Parliament is where the government is held to account, where it does have to explain its actions to the Australian people, and where it does have to face the questions of the opposition. Now, it's an old, sometimes cliched statement, but a government is only as good as its opposition. And it is our role and our responsibility, yes, to be constructive where we need to be, but to be critical where we have to be. So I think, 6 sitting weeks between now and the end of the year? It's incredibly light on.
Yeah, I'm just surprised they're not in a hurry to get there. 9 years rattling around in opposition, you'd think you'd be very keen to get down to Parliament, get it fired up and start putting your stamp on the place, but maybe they've got other things they want to deal with. I want to talk to you about the opposition attitude, though, to Labor policies and this report that moderate Liberals are saying they might even cross the floor to support Labor's new emissions reductions target for 2030, 43% by 2030. Surely the lesson of the current energy crisis, and as I showed what we're seeing in Europe at the moment, is that we've gone too hard, too fast. Sure, we would all love to reduce emissions as much as possible, but clearly our energy system can't handle the amount of renewables we're putting into it at the moment.
We'll have those discussions when we meet as a party in the opposition party room in Canberra, hopefully when Parliament sits before too long. But the important thing is, this is just classic Labor and the Greens getting fixated with targets, because it isn't actually about the target itself. It's about how you get there, how you manage the transition, as you absolutely just said, Chris, and how you make sure that that transition doesn't add ridiculous dollars to the cost of people's power bills. Now, Labor made promises when they came into government, including that power bills would go down by $275 by 2025. I'm not sure if we'll hear them repeat that very much into the future, but it is all about managing the transition. And I'll give you an example, the Kurri Kurri gas plant. I was up there with Angus Taylor, a gas peaking plant in the Hunter, because a coal-fired plant, adhering, is closing in 2025. And on that day, Labor had all sorts of positions. They didn't like it, they were against it, and finally they said, well, we're sort of supporting it, but only if it has, I think, 30% green hydrogen by 2030. Now, would they say that today? Of course not. So, you just don't have confidence in a government that can't properly manage the energy market and the transition that we all know has to happen properly to renewables.
Well, this is the important thing. Surely this is already shaping up as your key policy path back to government, and that is prioritising energy reliability and affordability over the climate targets. Labor has demonstrated very clearly that it's those targets that matter most, even though global emissions are increasing. So meeting these targets won't actually benefit the environment. Will the coalition come out and unashamedly say that energy security is a higher priority than global reductions targets?
Look, I think it's about getting the balance right, and I think it's about adhering to net zero by 2050. but it's most importantly showing people how we get there and that we won't be adding costs to their household budgets, or more importantly, the cost of running their business and manufacturing. Because if we do that, then the strong economy that Labor inherited is going to start to fray at the edges, because the business confidence and the business investment won't be there. Now, what we had under a long and detailed technology investment roadmap actually helped the rest of the world reduce its emissions. And this is critical, because we know we're only 1.3% of global emissions, but we also know that we can export our innovation, our smarts, our technology to the countries that are emitting far more than we do, and actually have to do some of the heavy lifting to get world emissions down. So we were playing our part with partnerships with Singapore, with Germany, with Japan, all around hydrogen and new technology, ultra low cost solar, and so on. And that really shows the way the coalition looked at this as the broad picture, as the whole picture, as the global picture.
But the coalition balked at nuclear, and when you look at the tens of billions of dollars spent on renewable subsidies and other sorts of development, and that's going to be ongoing, and then you look to France, where they've shown that over time nuclear is reliable and affordable and, of course, emissions-free. Isn't it obvious that the whole world needs to embrace nuclear, including Australia, if we're to get to net zero efficiently?
We certainly included the potential development of small modular reactors in our technology roadmap. And nobody on our side is saying we're absolutely ruling it out. But I do recognise the social licence that's needed, and really the bipartisan approach that is ideal if we are to go ahead and make these developments and these investigations. So, there is a legislative moratorium in place. It's in the EPBC Act that I used to administer, so I know it well. But what I've always seen is the need for that social licence, and the need for both sides, all sides of the House, to say, what harm is there in taking the next steps to investigate the development of small modular reactors, to talk about how we would manage them, to actually have a sensible policy-related technical discussion. And, that is across the board, and if you like, it's agnostic when it comes to finding baseload power that makes sense for us in the next century.
It is a conversation we have to have. Thanks for joining us, Sussan. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Sussan Ley there, finishing up on nuclear energy. Yes, you need a social licence. Yes, in the end, you probably need bipartisan agreement, but you will never get either of those things without advocating, without advancing the debate. And that's what we've got to do in this country. All the experts tell us you won't get to net zero, either in Australia or globally, without embracing nuclear power. What are we waiting for? Have a look at what France is doing and follow suit.